This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy. We go deep and lightly surface the big ideas. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be deep diving into something super relevant, like no matter what you do in life, integrative negotiation.
Absolutely. A fascinating topic.
And guess what? We're even going to see how this concept is being used to, get this, train AI.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable how this technique can be applied to, both human interactions and AI development.
Right. It's like, I don't know, it's like we're blending psychology and technology.
Exactly.
So to get us started, we've got some really interesting excerpts from a research paper. It's called, INA, an integrative approach for enhancing negotiation strategies with reward-based dialogue system.
Catchy title.
I know, right? And then we've got this really insightful article that really dives into how integrative negotiation is actually being used to train AI. And then to round things out, we've got this social media post from a professor who just breaks down the difference between distributive and integrative bargaining.
That's a good mix of sources.
Yeah, I think so too. But before we get, too far into this, can you just explain what exactly integrative negotiation, in simple terms?
Okay, well, imagine you and a friend are trying to split a delicious pie, right?
Okay, I like where this is going.
So distributive bargaining is like arguing over how to slice that existing pie, right? Someone wins, someone loses. Integrative negotiation, on the other hand, is about figuring out how to bake a bigger pie.
Ooh, I like pie.
So everyone gets more.
So instead of just dividing up what already exists, you're creating more value for everyone involved.
Exactly. You're not just fighting over crumbs, you're making more pie.
Okay, that sounds way less stressful and definitely more delicious.
And the cool thing is, researchers are actually, get this, they're training AI to negotiate in this way.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, they're teaching AI to understand the other side's needs and to come up with, creative solutions that benefit both sides.
Wait, AI can actually understand what someone else wants? I mean, I know AI is getting pretty sophisticated, but that's a whole other level.
All right, so let me give you a specific example from the research paper, okay? Imagine you're buying a tablet online.
Oh. Yeah.
And the AI customer service agent, the one you're chatting with, is actually trained in integrative negotiation.
Right.
Right? You tell the AI that, yeah, you want the tablet, but the price is a little steep for your budget.
Yeah, been there.
Now, this AI doesn't just automatically offer a discount. Instead, it tries to understand what's important to you, right? It might suggest, hey, maybe we remove the stylus from the bundle to bring the price down.
Oh, that's actually pretty clever. It's not just about offering the lowest price. It's about figuring out what the customer really wants and then, customizing the deal, right?
Exactly. The AI is trained to understand that maybe you'd be okay with sacrificing that stylus to get the tablet at a price you're more comfortable with.
Okay, so we're starting to see how this can play out in actual real world situations, which is super cool. But, let's face it, not everyone's an AI trained to bake bigger pies. What happens when you're stuck negotiating with someone who just wants to win no matter what? Those people who, I don't know, they would be perfectly content flipping a coin to decide who gets the bigger slice, even if it means the other person gets nothing.
You're talking about the classic distributive bargainer.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be so tough to deal with, right? How do you even begin to negotiate with someone who's just not interested in finding common ground?
It can definitely be tricky. But luckily, our professor friend, the one with the social media post, actually highlights some really effective strategies for dealing with these types of negotiators.
Oh, good. Because I think we've all encountered those hard bargainers at some point, so any advice is greatly appreciated.
So one important thing to remember is you need to try to shift their mindset away from that, short-term winner-takes-all mentality.
Okay, easier said than done, right? If someone's dead set on winning, how do you actually change their perspective?
Well, instead of focusing on just who gets what right now, you can try to emphasize the long-term benefits of cooperation.
So, showing them how working together will benefit them in the long run.
Exactly. Sometimes just seeing that bigger picture can help them shift their thinking.
Okay, so even with those hardcore negotiators, there's still hope for reaching a, mutually beneficial agreement.
Absolutely.
Right.
Another really effective strategy is using objective data and benchmarks, things like market rates or industry standards, to support your arguments.
So it's like appealing to their logical side, even if they're coming at it from a purely emotional standpoint.
Exactly. Even if they try to, brush it aside initially, just presenting that solid evidence can really help ground the conversation.
That makes sense. So we've got long-term thinking, objective data. Any other strategies we can use when dealing with those tough negotiators? Because sometimes it feels like they're just speaking a completely different language, you know?
Yeah, for sure. If those first approaches aren't really working, you could always try introducing, hypothetical scenarios or case studies. Like, what if we tried this approach? How would that play out?
Oh, interesting. So it's like you're not directly challenging their stance, but you're kind of subtly nudging them towards a different way of thinking.
Exactly. And sometimes seeing those concrete examples can help them, understand how a more collaborative approach could actually lead to better results for them in the end.
Okay, I like that. But let's be honest. Sometimes even the best strategies don't work. What happens then?
Well, if all else fails and you're just getting nowhere, you might want to consider bringing in a mediator,
Ah, a neutral third party.
someone who can help reframe the conversation and just facilitate, more productive dialogue.
That's a good point. Sometimes you just need someone else to like step in and help everyone see the bigger picture. But now I'm curious. Can you give us some real world examples of integrative negotiation, like in action, like situations that our listeners might actually encounter in their own lives?
Absolutely. Our
Hmm.
sources are full of fascinating examples. For instance, let's talk about contingent contracts.
Okay, contingent contracts. I'm intrigued. What are those?
It basically means that the terms of the agreement are tied to future events. So, like, imagine a couple is negotiating how to divide household chores. They could create a contract where, the chore division changes if one partner gets a promotion that requires them to work longer hours or something like that.
That's smart. So it's like building flexibility into the agreement.
Yeah, exactly.
Because let's be honest, life happens, things change.
Right. And this way, you prevent resentment from building up if one person suddenly feels like they're, doing more than their fair share.
That's a really good point. So it's like a win-win. It ensures that both partners feel fairly treated, even as their lives change.
Exactly. And it's just one example of how integrative negotiation can be used.
Ooh, I'm all about finding creative solutions, so tell me more. What other examples do we have?
Well, how about gamification? The source material talks about how parents can use a story point system for bedtime negotiations with their kids.
Okay, gamification. That sounds fun. How does that work?
Well, the kids earn points for going to bed on time, right? And those points can then be exchanged for, like, extra stories or other bedtime privileges.
Oh, that's brilliant. So it takes the stress out of bedtime and turns it into like a game.
Exactly. It's all about finding creative ways to incentivize the behavior you want to see.
I love that. It's like sneaking in those important life lessons while they're having fun.
Right.
Okay, these examples are great. Do you have any more?
All right, one last one. Reverse negotiation.
Reverse negotiation. Okay, what's that?
So imagine you're planning a family vacation, right? And everyone has different ideas about where to go and what to do.
Yeah, classic family vacation dilemma.
Instead of starting with all the arguments about destinations or activities, you start with the desired outcome. Like, okay, what kind of vacation do we want? A vacation that everyone enjoys.
Oh, so you start with the why of the vacation, that shared goal, and then work backwards from there.
Exactly. And by focusing on that end goal first, you're much more likely to find a solution that actually satisfies everyone's needs.
That makes so much more sense than just arguing about where to go. It's about shifting the focus from individual preferences to a collective goal, right?
Precisely. And that's, I think, a key element of integrative negotiation, finding those creative solutions that address everyone's interests rather than just focusing on individual wins.
Okay, so we've seen how this can apply to like personal situations, which is great. But I'm wondering, can integrative negotiation be, scaled up? Like, could it be used to address something as complex as, say, international relations?
That's a fascinating question. And believe it or not, the source material actually touches on that very topic.
Really? Now I'm even more intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, it talks about the whole, complex situation of international trade disputes like the ones we see in the news all the time.
Yeah, those can get pretty heated.
Right. And it suggests that just maybe these same principles of integrative negotiation could be applied on a global scale.
Wow. Okay, so you're saying that instead of countries engaging in, trade wars or using threats or whatever, they
Mhm.
could actually try to work together to create agreements based on like shared economic or environmental goals.
Exactly. Imagine like tariffs that are tied to specific environmental targets, for example.
Oh, that's interesting.
It would incentivize countries to, cooperate towards a shared goal
Mm.
instead of just trying to punish each other.
Okay, now we're talking. That's definitely a more hopeful vision of international relations than what we usually see playing out?
Right. And imagine if multiple countries joined forces and created agreements that, diluted the power of any one nation's threats. It's about shifting the whole dynamic away from that, zero-sum game.
Towards a more collaborative effort.
Exactly.
Okay, wow, that's a lot to process. We've covered so much ground already. I think we need a quick recap before we move on. What are like the key takeaways here? Why should you, the listener, care about any of this?
You're right. It's easy to get lost in the details. So
Mm.
let's zoom out and see what we've got so far.
Oh, zoom out. I like it. So, what have we learned?
Well, first and foremost, integrative negotiation is about recognizing that there's often more to a negotiation than what's on the surface.
Right, like those hidden needs and motivations we were talking about.
Exactly. It's about understanding the other party's underlying needs and interests and finding creative ways to create value for both sides. Remember that whole baking a bigger pie analogy? That's the essence of integrative negotiation right there.
Okay, yes, I love that analogy. But it's not just some feel-good concept, right?
Mm.
It's a strategy that can lead to better outcomes for everyone involved. And we've seen how it can be applied in those personal situations, like dividing those chores or planning that vacation. But it can also be used in, business deals and those big international relations, even in training AI, which is mind-blowing.
And that's the key takeaway for you, the listener. Understanding these principles can actually empower you to be a better negotiator in any situation, right? Whether you're, haggling at a flea market or negotiating a salary or even navigating a complex international trade agreement, having these tools in your belt can make a world of difference.
Okay, I'm totally on board with that, but I have a confession to make. When you were talking about how the US government could use integrative negotiation to, improve international relations, I couldn't help but think, isn't that a little too optimistic? I
Oh,
mean, the world feels pretty divided right now? Do you really think these strategies can actually work when there's so much tension and distrust?
that's a fair point. And to be honest, there's no guarantee that integrative negotiation will magically solve all the world's problems. But here's what gives me hope. The same principles that work on an individual level, understanding needs, finding that common ground, creating value with them, those can, at least in theory, be applied to those larger scale conflicts as well.
Okay, I see what you mean.
It's about shifting the mindset from us versus them to how can we work together to create a better future for everyone?
I like that. But even if we can shift that mindset, how do you actually get people to cooperate when they've been like conditioned to compete? Like that distributed partner we talked about earlier. How do you even start a conversation with someone like that?
Well, as we discussed, there are strategies for dealing with those hardcore distributive bargainers, emphasizing those long-term benefits, using objective data, maybe even bringing in a mediator if needed. But sometimes it's not just about the strategies, it's about understanding the underlying dynamics at play.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's fascinating, really. The source material talks about the importance of shared reality and what they call the power of forgetting in negotiation.
Hold on. Forgetting, like literally forgetting things.
Not quite. It's more about letting go of past grievances, outdated information, or, rigid positions that might be preventing us from seeing new possibilities.
So it's like hitting the reset button on our assumptions, kinda.
Exactly. Because sometimes those assumptions, those, deeply ingrained beliefs about the other party or the situation, those can be the biggest barriers to finding a mutually beneficial agreement.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you're stuck in that us versus them mentality, you're never going to see the potential for collaboration.
And that's where the concept of shared reality comes in. It's about finding that common ground, those shared facts, values, or goals that can serve as a foundation for a more productive conversation.
So it's like we need to forget the things that are dividing us and focus on the things that unite us.
Precisely.
Hmm.
It's about creating that space for dialogue, for understanding, for the possibility of finding a solution that benefits everyone involved.
Okay, that's profoundly insightful, Indy. Surprisingly simple. It's like that saying, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die?
That's a perfect analogy. Forgetting, or maybe, letting go is a better term, can be incredibly liberating in a negotiation. It allows you to approach a situation with a fresh perspective, free from the baggage of the past.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, but let's be realistic here. Not everyone is going to be willing to just let go of their grudges or their deeply held beliefs, right? So what do you do when you're faced with someone who's just, not on the same page?
That's where the real challenge lies. And honestly, there's no easy answer. But even in those situations, the principles of integrative negotiation can still offer some guidance. It starts with understanding that negotiation is a process, not an event, right? It's not about forcing someone to see your point of view, but rather about engaging in a genuine dialogue where both sides feel heard and respected.
So even if you don't agree on everything, you can still find ways to, move forward.
Exactly. It's about building that bridge of understanding, even if there are some, gaps along the way.
Yeah.
And sometimes just the act of listening, truly listening, can be more powerful than any argument you could make.
Because when you feel heard, you're more likely to be open to new ideas. It's like you're building trust, even in the midst of disagreement.
Precisely. And that trust, that shared sense of humanity, can be the catalyst for finding those creative solutions that neither party could have imagined on their own.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all ties together. So it's not just about the, specific strategies of integrative negotiation. It's also about the mindset you bring to the table.
Absolutely. It's about approaching negotiation as a collaborative problem-solving exercise, not a battle to be won or lost. It's about recognizing that even the most seemingly intractable conflicts can be transformed when we shift our focus from competition to cooperation.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. We've gone from the technical details of AI training to the complexities of international relations, and somehow it all comes back to this fundamental idea of integrative negotiation.
Right. It's fascinating how these principles are so universally applicable.
Creating value, finding common ground, building a bigger pie for everyone. It's a pretty powerful concept when you think about it.
It really is. Whether you're dealing with a personal disagreement, a business negotiation, or even a global conflict, the underlying dynamics are surprisingly similar. It's about understanding human needs, navigating those different perspectives, and finding creative solutions that benefit everyone involved.
So what does all this mean for you, dear listener? What's the one big takeaway you should walk away with from today's deep dive?
I'd say it's this: next time you find yourself in a negotiation, big or small, ask yourself, am I trying to divide a pie, or am I trying to bake a bigger one? Because in the end, the most successful negotiators aren't the ones who, win at all costs, but rather the ones who create value for everyone involved.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll have AI negotiators helping us bake those bigger pies on a global scale.
Now, that's a future I can get behind.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Have you ever used integrative negotiation in your own life? What challenges did you face? What successes did you achieve? Share your experiences, your questions, your aha moments. Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, happy negotiating, everyone.
Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other podcasts, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.